on the way, but we want to make sure we keep you abreast of where we are in the process, how you can continue to participate. And so we've got a slide deck here that I put together. I'll be joined by John Harris, who's serving as our outside counsel, you might remember, helping along with the project to rehash some things that we've discussed in previous workshops regarding intervenor funding. I think that was helpful then, but it's even more pertinent now, given that we're at that stage in the process. So I want to make sure it's fresh on everyone's mind how you participate in that process. We have some handouts at the front. I don't know if you saw them when you came in or not. With the sign-in sheets, we've got a one-pager that goes into details of all different kinds of contact information from websites to, by the way, can you hear me in the back? Okay, good. A number of different fact sheets. We also have a kind of a manual that DPS has put together regarding intervenor funding, as well as the actual intervenor funding application. I think we've got 20 or so copies of that, so if you want a paper copy, please take one. If you want an electronic one, we have instructions on how to go about getting that material. So let me go ahead and get started here. I'll jump right into the preliminary scoping statement. Again, not assuming that everyone here is intimately involved with the Article 10 process and has other things to do throughout the day. I understand. We'll kind of take it from the top. The PSS, I'm going to call for short throughout the presentation. Preliminary scoping statement involves talking about the project and the environmental setting, as well as the scope and methodology for what studies will be used to evaluate potential significant adverse impacts associated with the project. And then it goes into a little more detail about how we would go about avoiding and minimizing, reducing impacts associated with the project. This is a high-level slide. I've got a detailed one after this one that you'll probably need it's kind of an eye chart. You'll need a magnifying glass to see it, or a telescope, one or the other. But high level, what the PSS is, it covers issues related to electrical system, ecology, public health and safety, cultural resources, transportation, noise. And I'll go into a little bit more in depth on each one of these. The purpose of what I want to convey here is what is in the document. We submitted the PSS on March 29th. And I'll talk more about later how you can access the document. But I want to give you a high level, this is what it looks like, and then we'll kind of attack each one by one. Thank you for that, much easier to see. And a number of other topics here on the right that I mentioned. Again, it's looking at impacts not just associated with the construction of the project, but also the operation of the project. So this is that sort of eye chart I was talking about before. There are 41 different sections associated with the application. You don't have to read them all, I'll read them off to you. But there's 41 different sections that talk about the various potential impacts associated with the project. That would all be part of what we put together for the application. The way to think of the PSS in some respects is it's almost a mini application. As I mentioned before, it's really looking at the methodology for studying the impacts associated with the project. And then the application itself will get into the actual impacts expected. So these are the 41 sections that come straight out of the Article 10 regulations, not all of which are applicable to a wind farm. So I've kind of grayed out the ones that don't apply. So you've got Exhibit 7, natural gas plant. We're not building a natural gas plant. Air emissions, yes, we'll have air emissions associated with our construction of our project, but there won't be any during the operation phase. This is really meant for conventional power plants. Nuclear facilities doesn't apply. We won't have a gas interconnection, no backup fuel. And then if you want to amend your application, that's what 41 is for. So these are the 41 sections. The first 3 or 4 kind of get into what is the project, where are you placing it, what are the surroundings. 5, electric system effects. There are a lot of different sections. I think that one has 5A through 5K, or very many components to that. It's really getting at what impact you expect the system to have on the grid. So you've got to do a study to determine whether or not the power you're injecting into the grid will result in any kind of reliability or stability issues. 6, wind power facilities really gets at whatever turbine is selected for the project, understanding various attributes associated with that. 8, electric system production modeling. The core of this one really relates to will this project result in backing off other projects from the grid? What does that look like? 9, alternatives. So with even with the secret process, Article 10 is very similar. You still have to look at what other alternatives are out there. The PSS gets into that detail. Consistency with energy planning objectives, looking around the state for energy policy, is the project consistent with that? Preliminary design drawings, not a whole lot that we have in the PSS that's applicable here. That's really more for the application. Again, we used these exhibits, the 41 exhibits from the application, as a guide for what we put together per the DPS regulations. They asked us actually to try to follow this format as closely as we could. Not just us, all projects that are going into the PSS phase, we try to do that. So I can go into all these. What I might do is at the end, we'll have a Q&A at the end, just for understanding what the format of the agenda will be for the meeting. We can tackle any one of these. I won't go through all of them. We'll have a copy of this slide deck up for people to download from the website later on this week. I kind of talked about the contents high level, and then in the gory details of the 41 sections. Again, it's meant to look at all the different studies. Can you identify what all the permits would be, local, state, federal, and then if there's a local law or other law that you're looking to override, you want to cite that in the PSS as well. Continuing on with the contents of the PSS, we talked about the first one already, proposed studies. The second section here is about what kind of information might you need. So it's important that, yes, I'd like to conduct this study, but what information will I need to do that? Some information you may have in hand, other information you may have additional work to do to collect to carry out the studies. And again, it's really more about focusing on methodology and procedures. And then the last piece is, if we've received feedback to date, we wanted to make sure that we have responses to that along the way. That's part of what would be required for filling out the PSS, and we want to make sure we have that. And in various sections throughout the PSS, you'll see that. We'll have a table at the end, what public comment we received, who we received it from, and what our response is to that. I mentioned it before, the status of the PSS, we actually submitted that back on March 29th to the New York State Department of Public Service. That actually kicked off a 21-day public comment period. Any person, agency, municipality can make comments on that. From a process standpoint, this is a little bit getting into the details, but I think I want to make sure we make this clear. The process is that comments are made to the applicant, so that it should be sent to us with a copy to be sent to the Secretary of DPS. And I'll go into later on how you can go about doing that. I've got it right here, actually. I've got two different ways. You can do it electronically or through snail mail, through US mail, whatever you're more comfortable with. We've got the website here, website email address here, and then for the secretary here, please, I'd like to point out, you need to include the reference case number, which for the Cape Vincent Wind Farm is this number here. So please specify that in any comments you submit. If you're doing it instead of electronically, that's just not something you're comfortable with, you prefer to do it by mail, this is my information on the top, and for the DPS secretary, here on the bottom. Again, that one-page handout that you may have seen when you first walked in, it's got all that information on it, the front and the back. So if you're worried about taking notes. Getting back to the overall process, where are we with next steps? So once the public comment period closes, we will then have to take all those comments into consideration, and we'll have 21 days as the project sponsor to then put together responses, a summary of the responses, the material comments that we received. The presiding examiner will then convene a conference to encourage resolution of the various issues that are raised as a result of those comments, and that'll be further dealt with in the stipulations process. An application cannot be submitted earlier than 90 days after the PSS. So if the PSS was submitted on March 29th, we could not submit the application earlier than June 29th. And again, while we have intervenor funding available, and I failed to mention this from the outset, while there is intervenor funding associated with the PSS, there is also an additional follow-on intervenor funding associated with the application later on. In conjunction with submitting the PSS on March 29th, we actually issued a check for funding the intervenor funding account at the state level. That's $99,750. and that funding is available now. Or is available, let me be more specific. The presiding examiner will issue a notice asking for proposals on ideas that individuals or groups may have for applying for those funds. So I don't think it's quite immediately available, but that'll be the process that has to be followed. So I'll actually stop right there. You can clean up any damage I may have just created, but hopefully that'll make it clear.